welcome my guest this morning. I'm very pleased to be joined by professors once again, political analyst Professor Molefe, as well as Professor Stephen Friedman. Gentlemen, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, so now a quick look at the big hashtags of the weekend. For this segment, we're very pleased to be joined by our very own SABC Digital News Producer, Ms. Naledi Shange. Naledi, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What was the biggest trends this week?
Well, obviously, the state capture report, we saw a lot unfolding in the courts. President Jacob Zuma deciding to abandon the bid to block the release of the report. But along the sidelines of that, we also saw South Africans coming together under the hashtag Save South Africa. They embarked on a mass march in Pretoria and other parts of the country saying that they're calling for better governance in the country.
What were they saying on social media?
Okay, we've got Mujapelo saying, fellow South Africans, let's stand for something or we'll fall for everything. And Mpilo Zondi said, I may not be in Pretoria, but I'm flying my flag wherever I am because this country is mine to save.
Was there no comments about the violence or the looting that actually
there was
happened afterwards?
There was actually a lot. Not everybody was positive about this march. They're saying that South Africa is a country of talk and no action. So we stand to see whether anything will actually come out of this.
Gentlemen, what did you make of these unfoldings, particularly with the looting in the aftermath and that proposal of that bill to be passed so that whoever organizes a march is going to be held liable for any damage to property or businesses?
Well, it's obviously a huge problem that South Africans across the spectrum don't seem to be able to express themselves politically without violence. I mean, that's a huge problem. Whether you're going to solve that problem by making people accountable in that way, I think is dubious. Because it raises, people have tried to do this with trade unions and to say, well, if one of your members commits an act of violence, the trade union is liable. It's not a fair system. I think you have to make sure that people who organize protests are very clear about explaining to the people on the protests that they have to be non-violent, that they have to respect people, and to do everything they can to make that happen. But I don't think you can hold a protest leader liable if 3 thugs at the back decide to destroy somebody's property.
A quick one, Prof?
Yeah, look, I mean, not only the violence really marred the protests, but the fault lines of the country were also on display in the protests. You basically had 3 protests, if you like, the EFF, the DA, and Save South Africa. They are pretty much in agreement about many issues, but they couldn't match, they couldn't meet together and act together. And that tells you a story, doesn't it?
Trust the Prof to point that out. Let's look at other big hashtags that were there. Naledi, what is the Saxon Wall Shabin that everybody is talking about?
The Saxon Wall Shabin. It also mushrooms from the State of Capture report. You'll remember that former public protector Thuli Madonsela's report placed Eskom CEO Brian Molefe around the Saxon World area numerous of times, right? But he's come out to say that this does not have anything to do with him having relations with the Guptas. He says there's actually a Shabin around the area. Now South Africans have gone in search of the Shabin, and let's look at what they're saying on Twitter. Here they're saying, we're waiting for an actual believable explanation. Responses like the Saxon Wall Shabin lower the standard of any possible debate. And we've got someone else saying, I'm disappointed in Brian Molefe. I admired him. Thuli Madonsela saved us.
Gentlemen, Professor Dinyek, what did you think?
Well, the Saxon World Shabin, what I find very, very funny about that whole thing?
Yes, Prof.
Is that one moment Brian Molefe was virtually telling jokes about the Shabin, about the young wife, about how cell phone towers work, and then the next moment he was crying. That shift was, for me, quite dramatic.
Professor, what did you think?
Well, I just wonder about the way he's chosen to respond to this, quite frankly. Because AJ Gupta, for example, has said that they're friends. So one would have thought that the way Brian Molefe would have handled it would be to say, yes, we're friends. It's a democracy, I'm entitled to have friends, and dealt with it on that level. He seems to have dug a bit of a hole for himself by saying, well, despite the fact that my cell phone records say I was there, it was really something else. He didn't actually say it was a Shabin, he said maybe it was a Shabin.
So what is it?
But, I think it's I was on some discussion the other day in which somebody said, well, he's entitled to be friends with who he likes. And I said, well, that's true, but then he mustn't come on nationally and say it wasn't about friendship, it was about something else. So I think he's in a difficult position at the moment, as far as, I mean, clearly, people tend to forget that the state capture report didn't actually say that anybody at this stage was guilty of anything. It's simply about investigation. But obviously, if public figures start saying things in public which then get questioned in this way, it undermines their credibility, and I think that's a problem for them.
Let's move away from Shabins now. Thank you, Professor Naledi. I mean, another big trend, I'm sure, a day that pirates would like to forget.
Yes.
What happened yesterday?
Before yesterday, let's rewind to Tuesday.
Yes.
The Buccaneers played against SuperSport United, and
6-1.
they received a thrashing, a 6-1 thrashing, and Twitter had a field day with Orlando Pirates, and these are some of the tweets that came through.
Yeah.
This one was actually from yesterday. Kananelo says, even though Orlando Pirates won tonight's game, we still haven't recovered from that 6-1 defeat. And this person says, Orlando Pirates disrespected me, and I will never forget that. I will tell my grandkids, SSU 6-1 Pirates.
So they're still tweeting about the loss, besides the
they're still
win yesterday.
nursing
It's
their
not
wounds.
enough.
No, they're still nursing their wounds.
Gentlemen, it was quite dramatic. I mean, the coach resigning also at 3 a.m. in the morning. I mean, what was going on in that club? Professors, do tell me what you think.
Someone actually wrote, I saw an opinion piece saying, Etrugral gives a good example of a leader who is accountable to South African political leaders. Now, I don't know if the situation he was in is quite comparable to the situation in which President Zuma is, but I think, President Zuma can learn from anyone. He could learn from Etrugral, I suppose.
Professor,
I was also struck by the extent to which people immediately made that connection. And see, you say some leaders are prepared to step down, etc. But as my colleague says, I suppose a football club manager is a bit different from a president. But it was interesting that everybody went on that angle.
And it's only a loss. I mean,
it's only
you must lose sometimes. Even Pirates,
6-1.
even Pirates has to lose sometimes. Nobody is perfect, not even Orlando Pirates.
And anyway,
I take it as a Pirates fan.
It doesn't affect me personally because I'm chair of the Pizza Mosemane for President Club. So.
That's where we leave it on that discussion. Naledi, thank you so much for the big hashtags
Thank
this
you
week.
very much.